So we're back with the biggest crowd of the week. With the biggest crowd of the week tonight. Supported by our faithful participant, Rabbi Natan, Sephora, Yishai, and Rabbi Shaddai. So we're continuing on this journey as we learned here in Shir that the base concept of Pesach is to build our intelligence, and Pesach to Shavuot is a process of developing our intellect, developing this aspect of das, developing this aspect of reason, to understand the messages that Hashem is giving to us and be able to block the messages from the other side, as we talked about in the last year. So I'm just going to start with a very famous pasuk in Bereshis, because I feel like the energy of Bereshis is this beginning of like new creation, this beginning of newness. And the point of this year tonight is the idea of continuing where we were at last night, which was this idea of removing the layers that could block us from receiving this new intelligence. So it's famous pasuk. If you guys have heard it before, I know you're holy. So, Vayakulu Hashemayim. Vayakulu Hashemayim v'ha'aretz. Go ahead.
The Kiddush.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, I know it good. So, anyways, Vayakulu Hashemayim v'ha'aretz v'chol sefa'am. Thus were finished the heavens and the earth and all their hosts. So I guess host is talking about the Rakim. God completed on the seventh day his work, which he has done. And he abstained. Oh, is that a good one for Vaishbod? He abstained on the seventh day from all of his work, which he has done. Vavarek Elohim et Yom Hashvi ve'kadesh oto kivo Shabbat melakto asher bara Elohim le'asod. He says, and God blessed on the seventh day, and he sanctified it, because on it he abstained from all of his work, which he has created. So we read this set of Pesukim every Friday night as we sanctify Shabbos. And the Pesukim remind us of the beginning of creation, this beginning of the human experience, and how there was a system from day one, that God worked on 6 days, and on the seventh day, he didn't do the same type of work per se. Because the Midrashim come and say it's not that Hashem didn't, it is Hashem did not work, but he didn't do the work that he did on the 6 days. But rather, Hashem allowed this influence of peace and tranquility and connection and rest and these different ideas that come into the world, right? So yesterday we talked about this idea of going and being in Purim, and Purim being a time, or we leaving Purim actually, and Purim being a time that, you know, as we learned through Rabbi Hirsch, he talks about a lot about this idea of seasons, which I think is a very profound way of understanding the Yom Tovim, because most of the time with the Yom Tovim, we think of them from the standpoint of the Agada, the story of what happened at a particular time. There was an exodus from Egypt. There was a time with, you know, Achashverosh and Haman and Mordecai, and, you know, on Shavuot, there was the time we received the Torah. And then, you know, on Rosh Hashanah is the time of man, the new creation of man, and on and on and on. And so a lot of times we get into that narrative because the non-Jewish world understands holidays from the standpoint of narratives. There's the story. This person was born on this day. This is the day of the independence. This is the day of Turkey celebration, all these different things. And so a lot of times we're influenced by the non-Jewish world. So we see that, but the Torah is saying something different. The Torah says that there was rechia that was built, filaments that were created in the beginning of creation. And through these filaments, there were influences that Hashem tucked away for specific times of the year. And as those influences came into the world, there were specific moments in history where those influences came in the world, and there was physical actions that Hashem decided that he's going to highlight and say, do these physical actions that were going on amongst people. He's going to use those physical actions to explain this influence that comes into the world. And Rabbi Hirsch goes even further and says it's not just the narratives, the story of how the people were interacting with each other in terms of Hashem's influence, is even nature. And so he says during the time of Purim, he says, is marking the end of the winter time. And the winter time is a time of concealment. It's a time where nothing is growing, everything is concealed. Depending on where you're at in the world, you have snow, you have rain, the trees are barren, have all these different things. No fruits are growing, everything's concealed. But underneath that perception of non-growing, underneath the soil, there's all these things happening. There's roots that are growing. There's plants that are about to sprout through the ground. There's all this growth that's happening, and what the sages say, what happens most of the time is that we only see, or we only connect with what we see with our five senses. But there's things that we can't see with our five senses. We can't see what's going on underground. Even now we have the Hubble telescope that goes way out of space, but that's only showing us a fragment of the existence of what's going on in outer space. So the human ego develops this gaiva that says that, oh, because I have this my perceptions, and I have my microscopes, and I have telescopes, and I have spaceships, I understand what's going on. But that's not true, because there's a whole picture of things that are going on in many different galaxies, many different universes, underneath the soil of Earth, and way below. There's even different worlds that exist underneath Earth, and all these things are connected to the influence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so the story of Purim is teaching us it's about concealment. So it's not accident that it exists during the end of the winter, the greatest time of concealment, right? When we're so used to concealment is reality. And so the influence that comes down into the world is the influence of concealment. But that concealment is only the precursor to this new revealment, this new beginning, and this is Nisan. This is Nisan. So these levels of influence that come down from the Shemaim, that comes down to the upper world, in the same way that rain falls to the ground and rain comes into this world, in that same way that there's influences that come into this world, it's only a mashal for the spiritual light, the spiritual energy that Hashem brings into this world. And the spiritual energy that comes in the world influences nature, it influences human behavior, it influences the stars, the planets, the distance between the moon and the earth. All these things are all based off of Hashem's influence. And so the idea of understanding the beginning of Bereshit is understanding that we live in a world of a system. We don't live in a reality of randomness. If you ever played video games or any type of, you have a cell phone. Your cell phone is functioning on a system. There's software that allows you to call people. There's software that allows you to go on social media. There's a software that allows you to be able to, communicate with friends, all these things. It's a software, and the software has certain rules. And so there's rules that are inside the software, gives us limitations, and it gives us expansion. This is the same system that the Torah is explaining to us. The cell phone and the technology of this computer and the software that helps it functions is connected, is expressing to us how the world that we function in. In the same way that we can download new software to give our cell phone new capabilities, we have the ability to download new software that allows us to experience the world that Hashem created in a new way. And this is the goal of the Torah. The goal of the Torah is to be able to give us the ability, every page, every parsha, every pasuk, every letter is giving us this ability to download a new program that allows us to understand and connect to Hashem in the most ultimate way. And this is everything. So everything that we see around us is just a mashal to understand the Torah, and the Torah is a mashal to help us understand the world around us, and everything is echad with Hashem. That's the reality. This is what we're holding at. This is the whole thing. So when we talk about the fact that Hashem created the universe, he created the stars, he created the oceans, he created the mountains, he created everything, and on a seventh day, he stopped. That's telling us that there's an order. There's an order. So the question is, how do we connect to this order? So right now we're in a season. We're in a season that we're leaving the end of the winter. Like they said, the darkest time of the morning is right before the light comes out, right? Right before you see this spark of light that builds into this horizon is at the moment before that, it's total darkness. Even the new moon, the new moon comes in and ultimate the darkness of the month. And then at the end of the darkness of the month, there's a speck. We do that speck, we say, oh, this is the beginning of a new reality. Not the full moon, not when everything's full seen, not when the light's out. Only when we see the speck, we know it's the beginning. So this speck, this aspect is the beginning of Nisan. And so the beginning of Nisan is this aspect of building the ability to see Hashem. Like we learned today in Shir, we learned that there is the tefillah, that we have during the week, the tefillah that we have during Shabbat, and the tefillah that we have during Yom Tov, specifically Pesach, are all functioning in different levels and connecting us to different levels of spheros, different levels of God's revealment into this world. And the tefillah that we do on Pesach, the Amida that we do on Pesach, and correct me if I'm wrong, has 5 levels to it. And these 5 levels that exist in the tefillah on Pesach connect us to this ability, what we discussed last week, which is das, right? We have Chokmah, Bina, Das. Chokmah and Bina, or this aspect of wisdom, the aspect of understanding. Das is the ability to actualize it and bring it down into a level of manifestation at a point. And so we understood in yesterday's shir, that this dynamic of Das is what separates the Jewish people and the people of the Torah with the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world does not have the tools on their own to build Das. Only through the Torah. Only through the Torah do we have this ability to build Das. And why is Das important? Because we have every thought that we have, every emotion that we have is coming from Hashem. Every thought, every emotion, every concept, every point of inspiration, every point of even sadness, everything is coming from Hashem. But our ability to understand that dynamic comes from this ability to have das. And so when you see people acting violently, when you see people stealing, when you see people being cruel, when you see people not being honest, when you see people doing the things that the Torah says the opposite, is because not because they're bad people, but they don't understand what they're experiencing. They don't understand their own thoughts. They don't understand their own ideas. They don't understand these points of who they are. And this is the aspect, the lack of understanding is because there's an absence of this concept of das. If there's 3 faculties that express the human intellect and being able to experience the human intellect, we're saying das is the aspect that allows us to function from our place of thought. So what happens when people don't have das? How do they function? How do they live? The sages tell us that they live from external influences. That's how they understand reality. That's how people were able to do Avodah Zarah. They were able to create sun gods and the god of love and the god of war and the god of passion and the god of art and the god of whatever, all these different gods that existed throughout history in different ways, were because people did not understand what they were experiencing. And so the Avodah Zarah was a way for them to connect to things that were going on inside of them. But Avodah Zarah does not work. You have something there? Right?
Yeah, I have a question about it to finish this.
Okay, I'm scared. So the point is saying that Avodah Zarah now defines something that I have within myself. I have this desire for love. I have this desire maybe to go to war. I have a desire to do this, but accepting that that desire comes from Hashem, the one source, Echad, I now project it or able to project it on an idol that's outside of myself that I don't connect to God, but I understand it, I perceive it through that aspect. What are you gonna say?
My question is basically, if I understand well, correct me if I'm wrong. You are saying that in winter time,
Yeah.
we have no possibility to build any strength, any spirituality, any ruchaniyut.
No.
It's only from Nisan, which is the end of the winter, that we have that possibility. I want to understand better.
Yeah. So the idea of the winter time, there's tons of spirituality, but on the physical presentation, it's concealed. It's like when a person goes through a difficult time in life, they look at it and they're like, oh, you know what? This is the worst time. Everything's going bad and blah, blah, blah. And then someone will come to them, a person who has died, so like, no, this is your highest moment. This is when you could recreate your entire self. But Hashem creates a reality where we have to do it on our own, where we have to cry out for Hashem. And this is what the story of Purim is showing us, is that during this particular, it's not Dafka just the winter, but just so happens that the Hebrew calendar matches up perfectly with the seasons. And the seasons themselves is a Torah, right? So we have the winter time. We have from Sukkot to Nisan, which is like the winter time. And it's a time of concealment. There's a time we have Hanukkah during that time. We have, a lot of the months that aren't so positive are during that time. But what is Hanukkah about? Hanukkah is all about concealment, right? It's all about the light, where we learn in Rabbi Pinchas Ashir that during the time of Hanukkah, we learn that if there's 10 levels of revealment of God's light that manifests in this world, there's an aspect of that light which is masculine and an aspect of that light is feminine. During that time, the aspect of God's revealment that is masculine, in a way, goes to sleep. And so this time of going to sleep creates this frame of darkness, but Hashem, like they have in the movie Jurassic Park, nature finds a way. So even though the Zah goes to sleep, still it's able to the masculine aspect goes to sleep. Still, the feminine aspect is still able to produce light, right? So it's through this idea of concealment. So Rabbi Hirsch comes and says, the winter time is connected, this concept. Not everywhere, there's some places that are more tropical and different, but the majority of the world during the winter, the sun and the earth are very far away from each other because of the rotation. And because of this, it's colder. Because of this, it's less agriculture growth. Because of this, all these different aspects of concealment in nature even exist. But what is a concealment? Because underneath the soil that things are not growing from, there's still something growing. There's roots, there's seeds, there's things that are growing, but you can't see it. So the Yom Tovim that we have on a Peshat level is teaching us that, hey, even though you cannot see the growth, even though it seems like it's darkness, is there. So the spring is where the growth, the spiritual growth that took forth during the winter now starts to sprout out. It starts to sprout out, and this is the new beginning. This is the Pesach Seder.
So this is to follow my question. It's known from the Zohar that in winter, some kind of plant can grow up. They have the possibility to grow up, not only to stay on the soil. And I think even they said about 18 sorts of plants that the Dafka grew up in winter. So how can you help me to conceal this situation with what Rabbi Ish is saying?
So the only way I can answer that is through Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Shir. And in his shir, when he teaches us this idea that the nukva has this ability to produce light. That's what we learned about on Hanukkah, that there's this idea of the nukva producing light during this time of concealment. During the time of Purim, the Masechta is called Megillah Esther, not Megillah Mordecai, not Megillah, any of the great, it's the woman. So this idea of the ability to generate life and light It's not just limited to the experiences that we had during the time of the Maccabees or during the time of Esther Malka. It's not just doing that, it even affects nature. So there's certain plants that only grow, like the Rav just taught us, that only grow during the time of concealment. And then not only that, he says there are 18 of them. And that connects us to the idea of chai, to life, right? And the system that we start the morning with the 18 brakot. So the point is saying, I'm just going. So the point is saying, so is this idea that the concealment of life, there's things that are growing that wouldn't normally grow during the time of the summer. So during the spring, so from Nisan, so from Pesach to Shavuot, you have a time during spring with all these new crops, all these new things, everything starts growing. It's a new Seder, it's a new concept. So the Kabbalists teach us at that time is a time where we build mochim, where we build chokmah, and we build dat. And so the tefillah, the 49 days of the Omer, the Seder on Pesach, all these things are connected. The ability to build the intelligence that when we say, we don't want to tell a difference between Haman and Mordecai, if we look at it through the lenses of what Rabbi Hirsch teaches, we're saying that the time of concealment and the time of revealment, Haman being the time of concealment, of darkness, because everything Haman was doing was really elevating the Jewish people to a whole new status. They're going to Achashverosh's mill that was making fun of the basic Mikdash, making fun of different things. They were at that level, but Haman comes and puts them on status with Mordecai is now running the whole show, and now they conquer all the lands. So Haman was the elevator. He was the elevator, but it looks like he's the concealment. This is the winter. So the light is Mordecai, the light is Esther. That's the light. So when we have drinks on Purim and you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordecai, is because we should have the thinking process that when we experience darkness or we experience success, it's the same thing. There's no difference. That's the mochim that we start to build during Purim, which fully manifests itself during the month of Nisan. And so the idea is to go forward is to be able to look at the world that we live in on a critical level. Yesterday, we brought the Pesukim of Lech Lecha, and we brought the Pesukim of the beginning of Bereshis, and we learned about Tohu Vohu, and this idea that the world was created with total darkness, was created with concealment. Even though the heavens and the earth were created, it still was expressed to the frame of darkness and emptiness, where you couldn't see anything. And it wasn't until Hashem says, let there be light, and there was light, then this whole idea of revealment of what's going on around you. So it was an interesting story. It could be a true story. I don't want to embarrass myself, so it may not be a true story, but it could be a true story. So in America, we have these theme parks where they have all these roller coasters and whatever. So one of the popular theme parks is a Knott's Berry Farm. You have Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain, Disneyland, Disney World, you have all these places. So Knott's Berry Farm is a big theme park. And so on Knott's Berry Farm, on Halloween, the whole thing turns into a haunted house, which is all about, I guess, Shadem maybe, right? And it turns into a haunted house. And so you go into the place and they got these rides, and in the rides, they have these all the lights are off, and you got these scary speakers and ghost sounds and people jumping up and they're wearing costumes and blood costumes and skeletons and all these types of things going on. So a friend told me a story that once he went with a group of friends, they went to Knott's Berry Farm when they were very young. A parent took them, it was a group of them, they all went. And so they went on this one particular ride, and this ride was like Pirates of the Caribbean type of a thing. They're going through it, and they don't have that in Texas. In Florida, okay, fine. So my wife went to it too. All right, we connect. And so, so you go through this thing, and it's dark, and you go through it's basically like a log, and you go through it, and it's like people jumping out and woo, making sounds, this, and you got echoes in the background, whatever. So a friend of mine was on this ride when he was very young, and all of a sudden there was a malfunction. And so the ride stops, the music stops, and all the lights come on. And so he's on this ride and he looks around and he's like, he sees this guy, he's dressed up in a costume and there's a speaker over there and there's this like fan squirting water out and it's like sprinkling everywhere and the whole thing. And he's like, whoa, wait, what's going on? You know,
so scary.
this isn't scary, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, he goes home. So years later, when kids get older, they like to go out, they like to get drunk. And they like to have these drinks and then they'll go to the same place. And so the friend said, he says like, you know what? I can't go to Not Scary Farm. It's just not scary. He said, why? He said, because when I was a kid, I saw the whole thing and it just took away the whole reality. And so the point is saying that on this process of going into Nisan, we want to get to a place where what looks scary, what looks like it's against us, what looks that we should be, it's a challenge, is really just a concealment. We're in a ride, and if you connect to Purim properly, and you go into Nisan, if you go into this process properly, then you get to a point where you're able to see that Haman is really working for you. The things that are working against you, the things that look like working, they're really working for you. But the way that you get to that place is that you have to go back to these pasukim. You know, where it says, Vayikul Hashemayim va'aretz v'kol sefa'am. He says they were finished. Vayikul Elohim, Vayom Hashvi, that the world was completed on the seventh day, meaning that there was a system created. There's a system of the winter. There's a system of the spring. There's a system where you harvest. You reap all the benefits from Sukkot to Shavuot to Sukkot. You have this process of harvesting where everything comes to manifest. And then again, you're going to go into the winter. So you're guaranteed to have good days. You're guaranteed to have bad days. It's guaranteed. But the question is, how do you react? And our ability to understand this comes from our ability to build das. Building das, like the Rav says, is one of the most important things. Like we learned today, a very unique thing about the idea of Bruria, right? Who was one of the great sages in the Torah world. And so there's a huge machlokus that some people say, oh, Bruria, you know, she fell into sin with one of Rabbi Meir's students. And then the sages say, no, that's not true. It's not true. It's not Rashi who said that. It's one of Rashi's students said in Rashi's name, and that's not really what's going on. And what happened in essence is that we understand Purim, and we have to look at the show, we understand Purim through Bruria, because it was her Kedushim on the Haggadah that Rabbi Tarfon, who's the Kohen Gadol of his generation, he was the one who said, no, it's Bruria's wisdom that allows us to understand it. But why is that so important that we're talking about a woman is connected to Pesach? Why is it so important? Because that aspect of Das is something that separates women from being a prophetess, then falling into the place of shading. That's the thing. So if we can learn that out through a woman, because we learn it out through a Jewish woman, even more so, we can learn out for ourselves. Because that's the whole struggle, is to build Das. And we learn in Rabbi Pinchas Ashir every Wednesday night that the greatest way that a woman builds Das is by davening early in the morning, by doing the work, making the home into a base midrash, by being able to be able to learn the practical aspects of Torah, learning the halakha on herself. Not that she needs to be told how to do it, she's doing it herself. So anyway, so the point is just saying, so building this idea of getting to a new reality, I just want to touch on a few points and we'll be done. So one of the ideas is when we look at society, because the job of the Jew, as we learned in Rabbi Pinchas Ashir, the job of the Jew is really to be a light to the nation. And that light to the nations is being an instrument, being an example of people who have reason. The people who are able to understand who they are, to understand what their thoughts are, to understand the messages of Hashem. And through these messages that we have of Hashem, they're able to develop a relationship with Hashem. They don't necessarily have to become Jewish. If they do, great. We want more people. We want all the souls of all the generations, all the people who are connected to B'nai Israel that's scattered all over. We want them all to return. But the point is the same. We're talking about 7 billion people. You know, I think it's almost maybe 8 billion, but It's 9 billion, so it's growing every day. And so the point is saying that we want these billions and billions and billions of people to know that Hashem loves them and Hashem wants to hear what they have to say. And any problem that they have in life, they can clarify it with Hashem. And if they need details, they could go to a person who's a descendant of Bnei Israel, and they could go to them for answers and information, and they're going to help them out. But the way that we do that is by understanding the world that we live in. When we look at the education system that exists in the world today, and I'm going to quote my mom. My mom says, she's a professor of education, and she says that it's not until the graduate school level that the student is even asked what they think about anything. The whole thing, they're not asked what to think about anything. So what does that mean? The whole education system doesn't build any form of das. There's no das being created. All the time, what is Torah study? You have to, how do you understand it? What is tefillah? How do you understand in communicating to Hashem? What is the mitzvot? Understanding how I have to express myself in everyday life. I have to have understanding in order to be a Jew. But the non-Jewish world has nothing that gives them that mechanism. If you're not Jewish and you don't have a Torah, how do you build this understanding of reason, this understanding of das? How do you do it? So you have a whole world. I don't care if you're in China. I don't care if you're in China, even more so in China, communism. Forget about thinking. Forget about any type of critical thinking in any communist place. Socialism, forget about it. And even in Western capitalism feeds off of the idea of having no das. No das. Why? Because you just want to consume. You just want to consume, and you want to consume more and more and more, the whole thing. And so the whole mechanism of Western capitalism is this idea of creating people that just want to consume and they don't even think twice. There's a new iPhone. Oh my God, I got to go and get it. You know, this whole thing. But how do they communicate this desire? Through commercials. So they have these like mirages that they're able to develop, audio mirages, video mirages, text mirages. And these mirages tell you that, you know, if you go here, you're going to be happy. If you go here, you're going to be fulfilled. If you go here, you're going to be important. And that's a desire that all human beings have. This allows us to understand this idea of a generation or a whole system of people that have no das, right? That have no das. So how does it work? It works from the standpoint of not being able to understand who I am, and there's an outside source that tells me who I am. When you go to school, no one asks you what you think. You're just there to tell me what the teacher told you. That's building the cycle, that's building the understanding that I don't matter. What matters is what the teacher says. And how will I understand the teacher? That's it. That's it. That's college. That's high school. That's junior high. That's elementary. That's kindergarten. That's the whole system. This is the idea. There's no education in education system. It doesn't exist. It's one big lie. In the societies that we have, if it was really education, we wouldn't have the chaos that we have. We wouldn't have the hopelessness that we have. We'll have every person's an innovator. Every person's a builder. No. So that's the education system. And then you take that education system, as my mom says, education produces society. And so now you have a society of people who never even articulated who they are, never articulated what they think, never articulated what the world means to them. They only know other people's ideas. And maybe they never even went to college. Maybe they only went to high school. Maybe they went to junior college. Who knows? But the point is saying that intellect is limited. But the secular world convinces us that they have a solution for us to be educated, because every human soul wants to know the Torah. Every human soul on planet Earth wants to know the Torah. But the point is, the way that they understand that desire is through secular education, because those are the only things that have been given to them that allow them to understand that they have a desire for knowledge. That's what the school does. And not only that, the school creates a grading system. And this grading system defines our perception of our knowledge. These are all internal dynamics, but none of it exists. None of it exists. We're only here to serve Hashem. This is why the world is created. I started a series of shirim with a Gemara in Brakot Daf Vav that talks about Rav Klizbo, says in the name of Rav Huna, that the world was created for the sake of for a person who fears Hashem and keeps the Torah. And Rav Klizbo brings this pasuk from Kohelet. In the pasuk of Kohelet, I think it's 12:12. It says that a person who fears Hashem, I think it says Ki ze kol ha'adam, saying that the reason for this whole purpose of the world was created for this is all of man. A person who keeps the Torah and fears Hashem, this is all of man. This is what the Torah is teaching us. This is what the Gemara is teaching us. And they go into detail and they express in detail that the fact is that Hashem created the world only for the light of the person who fears Hashem and keeps the Torah. That light that's revealed, this is the only reason why he created creation. So all the animals you see in the world, all the people that you see in the world, all the mountains and oceans and everything that you see in the world is only for the sake of the person to keep the Torah. And even the Rashayim, even the people who are negative, even the people who are evil, they're also created for the people who keep the Torah, because you need the duality. So anyways, so as we learned yesterday, we have to start questioning everything that we've been taught. We need to question, as Abraham in Lech Lecha was told, leave the place. You know what? I'm going to go to the pasuk right now. I'm not good. I'll find it says leave. It says leave the land that you're from. Leave the reality. Leave the concept. Leave the perception of what you think that land is. Leave from your relatives. Leave the whole idea of what you think you are and your people and this whole concept. Leave from your house. Leave from your father and go to the land that I'm going to show you. El haaretz asher ara echa. Ara echa. I will show you who you really are. I will show you who you're really connected to. I will show you. But do you have the courage to do that? Do you have the courage to leave these ideas behind and to be able to take a whole new Seder into your life? This is the beginning of Pesach. This is the beginning of Pesach. Being able to say, I'm going to accept a whole new order in my life. And I don't care about what anybody's told me. I don't care what the education system told me. I don't care what my parents told me. I don't care what my relatives. Now I got to honor and respect everybody. I'm not saying be disrespectful, but I'm going to leave everything behind. I'm going to leave what the society, I'm going to leave what the news says. I'm going to leave everything behind. And I'm going to say, Hashem, you tell me who you are. You tell me who you are. And that's one of the reasons why I feel people of color, Black people, have the advantage in this world. Because the world has treated us so badly and has ruined our perception of ourselves, perception of our land, that we could actually do what Abraham is told to do easier than anybody. And we could define ourselves by a new system, because the system that we exist is never going to give me honor. It's never going to give me respect. It's never going to make me to acknowledge my greatness. The system is never going to do that. But what a gift. What a gift it is to be a Black person, that I'm never going to receive anything from anything that I see around me. Everything that Hashem told Abraham Avinu to leave, I'm not getting anything from it. It's rejecting me. So that shows how much Hashem loves me, that he's not making me feel comfortable in my land. He's not making me feel comfortable amongst my relatives. He's not making me feel comfortable in the house. He's not even making me feel comfortable with my father, who's under attack, the Black father all over the world. He's under attack. Get him out of the house. Let the women run it. Get him on welfare. That's the whole system. So what a gift it is to be in a position that you already rejected by the very thing that Hashem is telling you need to leave behind in order for him to show you who you are. And we'll leave on one last halakha. We'll leave on a halakha. And we're done. We're done. We're done. One last halakha. Perfect. One last halakha. I like to keep it short. We're even a little bit longer than we were yesterday. Yesterday we're at 45 minutes. Now we're at 57. But the point is like this. During Pesach, we learned this halakha in Shir. There's 4 cups of wine, right? There's 4 cups of wine. And the Maharal says that these 4 cups of wine can be connected to the evolution of the Exodus from Mitzrayim. It could be connected, it's connected. So he says the first cup of wine releases us from the harsh slavery that the Pharaoh put us through, the difficult slavery that the Pharaoh put us through. The second halacha takes us away from the lighter frame of slavery. The third halacha is freedom. Now, this is the thing. This is the thing. The third halacha to the fourth says in between the third and fourth cup of wine, you can't drink anything else. You can't drink anything else. You can't drink anything else. You only could drink the fourth cup of wine. You can't have any beverages, nothing in between. And the sages say, why is this important? Because the freedom that you gain to the third cup can only fully be manifested because the fourth cup represents the freedom to serve God. So you get freedom in the third cup. You're free. But the fourth cup makes you free, but only to serve Hashem. This is the fourth cup. And so if you have anything in between those 2 cups, you lose out on the mitzvah. Meaning that if there's any separation between what you perceive as freedom and your freedom to serve Hashem, if there's any difference in your cycle, you missed out on the whole situation. And so let's look at Black people in America. And I'll end it with this point. Black people were given freedom from slavery. They were given freedom. That's the first cup of wine. They were given freedom from segregation. Second cup of wine. They were given freedom from the whole thing. Third cup of wine. But if you don't have the freedom to go and serve Hashem in his proper way, you go back to a worse form of tyranny that you put on yourself. Now there's no more peril. You've enslaved yourself. You've enslaved your mind. You enslaved your perception to the physical world that you're around because all you have is freedom. And so if you don't have Hashem and you don't have the Torah, you don't have the laws of the Torah, you're just a slave. You're out. You are out. So as we continue to go forward on this idea, and tomorrow, God willing, we'll go more into this idea of Shadim and how this idea functions in the world, we're going to be able to fix some stuff. We got to talk this stuff out. These are conversations that have only happened with very small, select group of people throughout history. And those people who've had these conversations about Shadim, had the conversations about how the human develops its perception of reality, how the human creates fantasies around these ideas that really reflect their inner desires externally. These are the people who architected the world we live in today. And we're just walking around like Shadim, looking for the next thing, looking for the next hype, the next rush, the next high, whatever it is, drugs, work, lust, whatever it is. We're just looking for the next high because we live in a reality where people are presenting it. People going to war right now. Why are people in Russia going to the Ukraines? They're cousins. They're relatives. They're probably 2 degrees of separation apart from each other. And they're fighting and killing each other. You're bombing your cousins. That is no das. There's no das there because there's no way you're going to go and kill your cousin. And we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen to the Jewish people with the destruction of the temple. We've seen it happen in places like America through the Civil War. We've seen it happen in places like Africa through different civil wars, different reactions. Okay, 2 tribes fighting. You guys are relatives. You guys are relatives. So the point is to say that this idea of no das is a reason why we have all the pain and suffering and chaos into the world. And only through the fixing of this das can we create the perfect reality that allows the Mashiach to reveal itself in this world. Any questions? Good? Okay, let me see if I can get this right. Baruch atah Adonai le'olam. Yeah, le'olam. Amen. Amen.
Without Adam.
Oh.
שכוח. חזק ברוך.